Part 1. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, but humanity had always been drawn to the stars. For centuries, they dreamed of reaching beyond their small blue planet. Now, in the year 2417, that dream had become a reality. Humanity had spread across the cosmos, colonizing distant worlds and building massive space stations. They had encountered other species, some friendly, others hostile, but none had ever sent a message like this. It all began with a signal, a faint pulse of energy detected by Earth's deep space observatories. At first, scientists thought it was just another burst of cosmic radiation, something natural and unimportant. But when they analyzed the data more closely, they realized it wasn't random. It carried a pattern, a sequence too precise to be anything but deliberate. Someone or something was trying to communicate. Commander Liam Hart stood on the bridge of the United Earth Fleet's flagship, staring at the holographic display hovering above the central console. The signal had been translated into a series of symbols, strange shapes that danced across the screen like living things. He didn't understand them, but he didn't need to. That was Rachel Meyer's job. Rachel sat nearby, her fingers flying over her tablet as she worked to decode the message. She was young for her position, barely 30, but already one of the best xenolinguists in the fleet. Her dark hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, and her eyes were sharp behind thin-rimmed glasses. "It's not easy," she said without looking up. "Their language doesn't match any known patterns." Liam nodded, though he doubted she noticed he trusted Rachel completely, even if her work sometimes felt like magic to him. "Take your time," he said. "We're not going anywhere until we figure this out." The signal came from a region of space far beyond human territory, near a glowing nebula nicknamed the Golden Veil. No ships had ventured there before, and the area was largely uncharted. Still, orders had come down from Earth Command. Investigate. If this was an attempt at first contact, humanity couldn't afford to ignore it. Captain Noah Blake leaned against the wall, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. Unlike Liam, who wore his uniform neatly pressed and polished, Noah looked like he'd just stepped off a battlefield. His jacket was wrinkled, and his boots scuffed. He wasn't happy about the mission, and he made no effort to hide it. "We don't know what we're walking into," Noah said, his voice low but firm. "For all we know, this could be a trap. Why would anyone send a message like this unless they wanted something?" Liam turned to face him. "Maybe they want peace," he replied calmly. "Isn't that worth exploring?" Noah snorted. "Peace? You really believe that? Every time we've met another species, it's ended in bloodshed. What makes you think this will be any different?" Before Liam could answer, Rachel interrupted. "I think I've got something," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. Both men turned to look at her. On her tablet, the alien symbols had transformed into crude approximations of human letters. The translation wasn't perfect, but it was enough to get the gist. "They're asking for help," Rachel explained. "Or maybe cooperation. The wording is vague, but it seems like they're reaching out because they're afraid. Something big is coming. Something dangerous." Noah frowned. "Afraid, or lying? How do we know this isn't some kind of trick?" "We don't," Liam admitted. "But we can't assume the worst either. This could be our chance to make allies instead of enemies. Isn't that what we've always wanted?" Noah didn't respond right away. Instead, he stared at the hologram, his jaw clenched. Finally, he let out a sigh. "Fine, we go. But if this turns sideways, don't say I didn't warn you." As the ship prepared to jump to the coordinates provided by the signal, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into the unknown. The crew buzzed with nervous energy, some excited, others terrified. Whatever awaited them beyond the Golden Veil, it would change everything for better or worse. Hours later, as the fleet entered the nebula, the view outside the windows took everyone's breath away. Streams of golden light swirled around the ships, casting an ethereal glow over the decks. It was beautiful, almost hypnotic, but beneath the surface, tension simmered. Everyone knew the stakes. First contact was a gamble, and no one could predict how it would play out. When the Erender finally appeared, they were unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Their ships shimmered with iridescent colors, blending seamlessly with the nebula. Through the view screen, Liam watched as one of their vessels approached, its hull pulsing softly with light. It was mesmerizing and unsettling. "Here we go," Liam muttered under his breath. He straightened his posture, steeling himself for whatever came next. Whether it was peace or war, the fate of humanity now rested in his hands. Part 2. The Erender ship hovered silently in front of the fleet, its surface shimmering like liquid metal under the light of the nebula. It didn't look like a weapon, but appearances could be deceiving. Every member of the crew stood tense, their eyes glued to the view screen as they waited for the next move. Commander Liam Hart gave the order to hold position, his voice steady despite the knot of uncertainty in his stomach. Rachel Meyer leaned forward in her seat, her tablet clutched tightly in her hands. She had spent hours preparing for this moment, studying every scrap of data she could find about alien communication. But nothing could have prepared her for the reality of meeting an entirely new species. The Erender's ship radiated a strange energy, almost alive in its movements. It wasn't just a machine, it felt like something more. "They're hailing us," announced Lieutenant Carter, the communications officer. His voice cracked slightly, betraying his nerves. "They're transmitting something." "Put it on screen," Liam said, stepping closer to the main display. The hologram flickered, and suddenly, the bridge was filled with soft, melodic tones. The sounds were unlike anything human ears had ever heard, layers of harmonies that seemed to resonate deep within the chest. Alongside the music, patterns of light began to form, shifting and swirling in intricate shapes. Rachel gasped softly, her fingers already moving across her tablet. "It's beautiful," she whispered, half to herself. "They're communicating through sound and light. This is incredible." Noah Blake crossed his arms over his chest, his expression unreadable. "Beautiful or not, we need to figure out what they're saying. Fast. We don't know if they're friends or foes." Rachel nodded, focusing intently on her work. Decoding the message wasn't easy. The Erender language operated on principles completely foreign to human understanding. But after several minutes of intense concentration, she managed to isolate key elements. "I think I'm getting part of it," she said, her voice rising with excitement. "They're introducing themselves. They call themselves the Erender, and—" She paused, frowning as she processed the translation. "They're asking why we've come." Liam exchanged a glance with Noah before turning back to Rachel. "Tell them we came because of their signal, that we want to understand them," Rachel typed furiously, converting Liam's words into a simplified version of the Erender's harmonic language. When she finished, she nodded to Carter, who transmitted the response. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the Erender responded, their lights flashing in rapid bursts, accompanied by a cascade of tones. "They're curious," Rachel explained, interpreting the reply. "They say they sent the signal because they sensed our presence in the galaxy. They thought we might share their goals." "Goals?" Liam asked, raising an eyebrow. "What goals?" Rachel hesitated, her brow furrowing as she worked through the nuances of the translation. "Unity," she said finally. "They believe all sentient beings should unite. They talk about strength in numbers, about working together against something. I'm not sure what yet." Noah stepped closer, his skepticism clear. "Unity sounds nice, but why now? Why reach out after centuries of silence? What changed?" Rachel shook her head. "I don't know. Their message is vague, almost poetic. Maybe they're trying to be diplomatic, or maybe they're hiding something," Noah countered. "We can't afford to take them at face value, Commander. Not until we know more." Liam nodded slowly. He trusted Noah's instincts, even if he didn't always agree with them. Still, he couldn't ignore the possibility that the Erender were sincere. If they truly sought unity, this could be humanity's chance to secure allies in a dangerous galaxy. Let's proceed carefully, he said. Rachel, keep working on the communication. Noah, prepare the fleet for any eventuality. As the hours passed, the crew continued to exchange messages with the Erender. Each interaction brought new insights and new questions. The Erender spoke of their homeworld, a planet bathed in perpetual twilight, where forests glowed with bioluminescent colors. They described their society as peaceful, built on cooperation rather than competition. Yet, beneath their words, Rachel sensed an undercurrent of urgency, as though they were holding something back. They're not telling us everything, she admitted during a private briefing with Liam and Noah. Their language is layered, almost coded. I can translate the surface meaning, but there's more beneath it. Something they're afraid to say outright. Noah frowned. Afraid, or manipulative. Either way, it doesn't bode well. Liam rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of the decision ahead. We need proof one way or the other. Until then, we stay cautious. That night, as the fleet drifted near the Erender's ship, strange anomalies began to appear in the surrounding space. Sensors picked up faint energy signatures, erratic movements just beyond visual range. At first, the crew dismissed them as natural phenomena caused by the nebula. But when the anomalies grew more frequent and closer, Noah voiced his concerns. I don't like this, he said, pacing the bridge. Those readings aren't random. Someone or something is out there, watching us. Liam studied the sensor displays, his jaw tightening. Could it be the Erender? Are they testing us? No, Noah replied firmly. These signatures don't match their ship. Whatever it is, it's different. Rachel listened quietly, her mind racing. She wanted to believe the Erender were trustworthy, but the evidence was stacking against them. Maybe they're not alone, she suggested, hesitantly. What if there are others here? Others who don't want us talking to the Erender? The thought hung heavy in the air, unspoken but undeniable. Humanity had entered this region of space blind, relying on hope and goodwill. Now, it seemed, they might have walked straight into a trap. Back on Earth, news of the encounter spread quickly. Senator Grace Kelly, a vocal critic of interstellar diplomacy, seized the opportunity to fan the flames of fear. In televised speeches, she warned that trusting aliens was a mistake one humanity couldn't afford to make. Her words resonated with many, fueling calls for a stronger military presence in the nebula. As tensions mounted both aboard the fleet and on Earth, Liam found himself caught between two opposing forces, the desire for peace and the instinct for survival. The Erender remained enigmatic, their intentions unclear, and somewhere in the shadows of the Golden Veil, unseen threats lurked, waiting for the right moment to strike. For now, the fragile thread of trust held, but how long could it last? Part 3. The anomalies in the nebula grew harder to ignore. Every scan showed faint energy spikes and fleeting movements just beyond the range of clear detection. Lieutenant Carter, the communications officer, was the first to voice what everyone else was thinking. It's like they're playing with us, he muttered under his breath during a quiet moment on the bridge. Whoever war, whatever is out there, they're watching every move we make. Rachel Meyer overheard him and frowned. She had been working tirelessly to decode more of the Erender's language, but her mind kept drifting back to those strange sensor readings. They didn't match the Erender's ship or any known phenomenon. Something about them felt wrong. Still, she tried to stay optimistic. Maybe it's nothing, she said softly, though even she didn't sound convinced. The nebula could be messing with our instruments. Captain Noah Blake wasn't buying it. He stood near the main display, arms crossed tightly over his chest, his sharp eyes scanning the data streaming across the screen. If it were nothing, why are they getting closer? he asked, his voice low but firm. And why do they only show up when we're talking to the Erender? Commander Liam Hart listened to the exchange without saying a word. He trusted Rachel's instincts, but he also couldn't dismiss Noah's concerns. The crew was already on edge, and these mysterious readings weren't helping. If anything, they were making the situation worse. Rumors spread quickly among the fleet, fueled by fear and uncertainty. Some believed the Erender were leading them into a trap. Others thought the anomalies were unrelated, perhaps scouts from another alien species entirely. Either way, no one felt safe. Back on Earth, Senator Grace Kelly wasted no time capitalizing on the growing unease. Her speeches became more inflammatory, painting humanity as vulnerable and naive for trusting unknown aliens. "We cannot afford to gamble with our future," she declared during a live broadcast, her voice echoing through millions of homes. "Every moment we waste negotiating with these creatures is a moment we could lose control of our destiny. The galaxy is not kind, it's brutal, and if we do not act now, we will be its next victims." Her words struck a chord with many. Public opinion began to shift, turning against the mission. Protesters gathered outside Earth Command headquarters, holding signs that read, "Protect humanity first," and "No trust for aliens." Even some members of the fleet started questioning whether they should continue the diplomatic efforts. Morale plummeted, and tensions aboard the ships reached a boiling point. Liam struggled to keep the crew focused. He held daily briefings, reminding everyone of their mission, to understand, not to judge. But even he found it hard to maintain optimism when the unknown loomed so large. During one particularly heated meeting, Noah confronted him directly. "You're letting your hope blind you, Commander," he said bluntly. "This isn't about peace anymore. It's about survival. If we don't figure out who or what is lurking out there, we're going to regret it." Liam sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm not blind, Noah. I see the risks. But jumping to conclusions won't help us. We need answers before we take drastic actions. And what happens when those answers come too late?" Noah shot back. "What happens when they hit us while we're sitting here debating?" Rachel stepped in before the argument could escalate further. "Both of you have valid points," she said diplomatically, "but arguing isn't solving anything. Let's focus on gathering more information. Maybe I can find something in the Erender's messages that explains what's going on." Reluctantly, Liam agreed. He ordered increased patrols around the fleet and instructed the science team to analyze every piece of data they had collected so far. Meanwhile, Rachel threw herself into her work, determined to uncover the truth. She spent hours poring over recordings of the Erender's transmissions, searching for hidden meanings or subtle clues. The task was exhausting, but she refused to give up. One night, as the rest of the crew slept, Rachel made a startling discovery. Buried deep within the layers of the Erender's harmonic language was a pattern she hadn't noticed before. Series of tones and light pulses that seemed to reference an external threat. At first she thought it might be a metaphor, part of their poetic way of speaking. But the more she studied it, the clearer it became. The Erender were warning them. They know something's out there. Rachel whispered to herself, her heart racing. She quickly typed up a summary of her findings and rushed to Liam's quarters. When he opened the door, his expression shifted from irritation to concern as soon as he saw her face. "What is it?" he asked, stepping aside to let her in. "I think the Erender are trying to tell us about the anomalies," she explained, showing him her notes. "They're not hiding anything, they're scared. Whatever's out there, it's dangerous, and it's not them." Liam's brow furrowed as he processed the information. If Rachel was right, then the Erender weren't their enemies. But that begged the question, who or what was? Before he could respond, the ship's alarms blared, jolting them both to attention. "Commander, we've got movement," came Carter's urgent voice over the intercom. Multiple contacts emerging from the nebula. Liam and Rachel bolted for the bridge, their hearts pounding. On the main display, dozens of unidentified ships appeared, their shapes jagged and menacing, compared to the sleek curves of the Arender vessel. They moved with precision, surrounding the fleet in a matter of seconds. Noah was already barking orders, preparing the fleet for battle. "Shields up, weapons hot," he shouted, his tone leaving no room for hesitation. Liam hesitated, his mind racing. Were these ships responsible for the anomalies? Had they been waiting for this moment all along? And where did the Arender fit into all of this? Before anyone could act, the unknown ships opened fire. Energy blasts tore through space, striking the fleet with devastating force. Chaos erupted as alarms screamed and crew members scrambled to respond. The Arender ship remained eerily still, its lights dimming as if it were powering down. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Noah yelled over the noise, his face grim. "We should have left the second we saw those readings." Liam clenched his fists, torn between anger and guilt. Had they misjudged the situation, or had they simply been too slow to react? As the battle raged on, one thing became painfully clear. Humanity's fragile hopes for peace had just shattered into pieces. Part 4. The battle was chaos. Energy blasts lit up the darkness of space, illuminating the nebula in flashes of blinding light. The fleet fought back with everything it had, but the enemy ships were too fast. They darted between the human vessels, firing precise shots that crippled shields and tore through hulls. The Arender ship remained eerily silent, its shimmering surface now almost invisible against the golden haze of the nebula. Commander Liam Hart gripped the railing on the bridge, his knuckles white as he watched the destruction unfold. Explosions rocked nearby ships, their debris floating like ghostly remnants in the void. "Status report," he shouted over the noise, his voice cutting through the alarms and panicked shouts of the crew. "We're losing ships, Commander, Lieutenant," Carter replied, his hands trembling as he worked the console. "Shields are down on 3 cruisers. Another one just went dark." Noah Blake barked orders from across the room, his face grim but focused. "Divert power to the forward cannons. Target the lead ship there, coordinating the attack." Rachel Meyer stood frozen near the tactical display, her eyes wide with horror. She had spent so much time trying to decode the Arender's language, hoping for peace. Now, all she could see was death and destruction. Her mind raced, searching for answers. Who were these attackers? Why had they struck without warning? And why hadn't the Arender done anything to help? "Rachel, get to the communications station," Liam ordered, snapping her out of her daze. "Try to contact the Arender. Ask them what's going on." She nodded quickly and rushed to the console, her fingers flying over the controls. But when she sent the message, there was no response. The Arender ship remained silent, its lights dimmed to almost nothing. It was as if they had vanished, leaving humanity to fend for itself. "No answer," Rachel said, her voice shaking. "They're not responding." Liam clenched his jaw, frustration boiling inside him. Had they been wrong about the Arender all along? Were they complicit in this attack? Or had they simply abandoned humanity to its fate? The enemy ships pressed their advantage, circling the fleet like predators, cornering their prey. One by one, the human vessels fell, their defenses overwhelmed. The once proud fleet was reduced to a handful of battered ships. Struggling to stay alive, "We can't hold them off much longer," Noah growled, his voice tight with anger. "We need to retreat or we'll lose everyone." Liam hesitated. Retreating felt like admitting defeat, but he knew Noah was right. Staying would only lead to more casualties. "Signal the fleet to fall back," he said finally, his voice heavy with regret. "Set a course for Earth. Maximum speed." As the order spread through the remaining ships, the fleet began its desperate withdrawal. The enemy didn't pursue, content to let them escape. By the time they reached safer territory, the damage was done. Half the fleet was gone, and morale was shattered back on Earth. News of the attack spread like wildfire. Senator Grace Kelly wasted no time using the tragedy to push her agenda. In a fiery speech broadcast across the planet, she condemned the mission as reckless and irresponsible. "This is what happens when we trust strangers over our own people," she declared, pointing an accusing finger at the camera. "The Arender led us into a trap, and now brave men and women are dead because of it. Enough is enough. Humanity must stand together and fight back." Her words ignited a wave of outrage. Protests erupted outside government buildings, demanding justice. Calls for war drowned out any voices of reason. Public opinion turned sharply against the Arender, branding them as manipulative aggressors who had orchestrated the attack. But Rachel refused to believe it. Despite the evidence or lack thereof, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The anomalies, the mysterious ships, the Arender's silence, it all pointed to a deeper story, one that hadn't been fully uncovered yet. Late one night, after most of the crew had retired to their quarters, Rachel stayed behind in the lab. She replayed the recordings of the Arender's transmissions, listening intently for anything she might have missed. Hours passed, and just as fatigue began to set in, she noticed something strange, a faint undertone buried beneath the harmonies. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Her heart raced as she isolated the sound and ran it through the translation software. Slowly, the meaning began to emerge. The Arender weren't talking about unity or cooperation in those final messages. They were pleading for survival. Their homeworld was dying, ravaged by environmental collapse. They had sent the signal, not out of goodwill, but out of desperation. They needed resources to save themselves. Rachel stared at the screen, her mind reeling. If the Arender were truly in such dire straits, then their actions made sense. They hadn't lured humanity into a trap they had been too afraid to reveal their true intentions. But someone else had taken advantage of the situation. Someone had used the Arender's vulnerability to turn humanity against them. When Rachel showed her findings to Liam, he listened quietly, his expression unreadable. "You're saying the Arender aren't our enemies," he said finally. "That they're victims, just like us." "They're scared, Commander," Rachel replied. "And whoever attacked us knew exactly how to exploit that fear. This wasn't random, it was calculated." Liam sighed, running a hand through his hair. The weight of the revelation settled heavily on his shoulders. If Rachel was right, then humanity had made a terrible mistake. They had misjudged the Arender and fallen right into someone else's plan. But proving it wouldn't be easy, not. With Earth clamoring for blood, Noah joined them shortly after, his usual scowl deepening as Rachel explained her theory. "Even if you're right," he said gruffly, "it doesn't change the fact that we got hit hard. People are dead. Ships are destroyed. You think Earth is just going to forgive and forget?" "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Rachel shot back. "I'm asking for the truth. If we don't figure out who's really behind this, we're going to make the same mistake again. And next time, it might cost us everything." Liam looked between them, torn. He wanted to believe Rachel's theory, but the political pressure was mounting. Senator Kelly's calls for war were gaining traction, and Earth Command was already preparing for retaliation. If they acted too hastily, they risked plunging humanity into a conflict it couldn't win. For now, the question remained unanswered. Who had orchestrated the attack? And what did they stand to gain from turning humanity and the Arender against each other? As the fleet limped toward Earth, the pieces of the puzzle slowly began to come together, but the picture they formed was far darker than anyone could have imagined. Part 5. The fleet's return to Earth was met with a mixture of grief and fury. News of the attack had spread quickly, and by the time the battered ships entered orbit, the planet below was consumed by outrage. Protesters filled the streets, holding signs that read "No more betrayal" and "Protect our future." The images of destroyed ships and lost lives dominated every screen, stoking anger toward the Arender. Humanity wanted answers, and it wanted revenge. Commander Liam Hart stood on the bridge of the flagship, staring down at the blue-green orb of Earth. It looked peaceful from this distance, but he knew the reality was far different. The political storm waiting for him would be fierce, and he wasn't sure how to navigate it. Senator Grace Kelly's voice echoed in his mind, her calls for war ringing louder than ever. He clenched his fists, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. How could they explain the truth when so many were already convinced of the guilt? Rachel Meyer sat nearby, her tablet resting on her lap. She hadn't slept much since uncovering the Errander's hidden plea for help. The weight of what she'd learned pressed heavily on her shoulders. If humanity acted now, if they declared war without understanding the full picture, they would make a grave mistake. But convincing others to listen wouldn't be easy. "Commander," Lieutenant Carter said softly, breaking the silence. "Earth Command is requesting an immediate debriefing." Liam nodded, though his expression remained grim. "Understood. Prepare the report." As the crew worked to compile the data, Rachel approached Liam cautiously. "We need to tell them about the Errander's homeworld," she said. "If people knew why they sent the signal, why their desperate pit might change things." "It might," Liam replied, his tone heavy with doubt. "But right now, emotions are running too high. Most won't care about their reasons. All they'll see is betrayal." Noah Blake joined them, his usual scowl deepening as he overheard the conversation. "She's right, Commander. We can't keep this quiet forever. But if we go public with it now, it'll only make us look weak. Like we're making excuses for them." Rachel turned to him, her eyes flashing with determination. "It's not about making excuses. It's about finding the real enemy. Whoever attacked us used the Errander's desperation to turn us against them. We're playing into their hands if we don't stop and think." Noah crossed his arms, unconvinced. "And what happens when Earth demands action?" "You think they'll sit back and wait while we investigate?" Before Liam could respond, the ship shuddered slightly as it docked at the orbital station. The debriefing couldn't be delayed any longer. With a heavy sigh, Liam straightened his posture. "Let's focus on one step at a time. First, we deliver the facts. Then, we figure out our next move." The meeting with Earth Command was tense. Generals and politicians filled the room, their faces hard and unyielding. Senator Grace Kelly sat at the center of the table, her presence dominating the space. She wasted no time launching into accusations, her voice sharp and cutting. "You led our fleet into a disaster," she said, pointing directly at Liam. "You trusted aliens instead of protecting our people. Now, because of your failure, dozens of ships are gone, and hundreds of lives have been lost. What do you have to say for yourself?" Liam met her gaze steadily, though his jaw tightened. "Senator, the situation is more complicated than it appears. The attack came from unidentified ships, not the Errander. There's evidence suggesting they may have been manipulated, just like we were." Kelly scoffed, leaning forward aggressively. "Evidence? Or speculation? Are you telling me the Errander aren't responsible? That we should just forgive them and move on?" "No," Liam replied firmly. "I'm saying we need to understand what really happened before we act. Declaring war based on assumptions will only escalate the conflict." Rachel stepped in then, holding up her tablet. "We've decoded part of the Errander's message. They're facing environmental collapse on their homeworld. Their signal wasn't an act of aggression, it was a cry for help. Someone exploited that vulnerability to drive us apart." The room fell silent for a moment as the officials exchanged skeptical glances. Finally, General Harris spoke, his voice gruff. "Even if that's true, it doesn't change the fact that we were attacked. If the Errander knew something was coming, they should have warned us. Instead, they stayed silent and let us walk into danger." "They were scared," Rachel insisted. "They didn't trust us enough to share their struggles, and whoever attacked us used that mistrust to set us up." Kelly rolled her eyes, clearly unimpressed. This is all conjecture. What we know for certain is that humanity has suffered losses. We can't afford to waste time chasing shadows. The people demand justice and we'll give it to them. Her words ignited murmurs of agreement around the table. Liam felt the tide turning against him, but he refused to back down. Justice isn't the same as vengeance, he said, his voice rising slightly. If we rush into war, we risk destroying any chance of peace, not just with the Erender, but with other species in the galaxy. Is that what we want? To become the aggressors? Kelly slammed her hand on the table, silencing him. Enough. This isn't a debate. Humanity's survival comes first. From this moment forward, the Erender are officially classified as hostile. Any further communication with them is forbidden. The decision was final, and there was nothing Liam or Rachel could do to change it. As they left the meeting, both felt the weight of failure settling over them. They had tried to expose the truth, but fear and anger had won out. Days later, the declaration of war reached every corner of human space. Ships were mobilized, weapons upgraded, and propaganda campaigns launched to rally support. Posters depicting the Erender as deceitful invaders appeared everywhere, erasing any lingering doubts about their guilt. Rachel struggled to accept the outcome. She spent hours alone in her quarters, replaying the Erender's messages and searching for clues about who had orchestrated the attack. If she could find proof of another party's involvement, maybe she could still turn the tide. But time was running out. One evening, Noah found her poring over her notes, her face pale with exhaustion. "You're wasting your energy," he said, bluntly. "No one's going to listen to reason now. War's already begun. I can't just give up," Rachel replied, her voice trembling. "If I do, then everyone who did, including those ships, will have done so for nothing." Noah hesitated, his usual certainty wavering for a moment. "Maybe you're right," he admitted reluctantly. "But if you're going to fight this, you'll need allies. And right now, you don't have many." Rachel looked up at him, hope flickering faintly in her eyes. "Will you help me?" For a long moment, Noah didn't answer. Then, with a resigned sigh, he nodded. "Fine, but if we're doing this, we'd better be ready for the consequences." As they began planning their next steps, neither realized how dangerous their quest for the truth would become, more how deeply rooted the conspiracy truly was.